Heard all of the chatter surrounding Retatrutide. You probably watched my video, which I will link here. If you haven't done so yet, I highly suggest you watch it after this one. But it is kind of a miracle drug when it comes to weight loss. However, how do you actually get Retatrutide? If you wanted to go out and get it, you could possibly do so through sketchy websites online, which I highly recommend you don't do. Or there are actually clinical trials right now that are enrolling that need participants to trial the medication. So let's get right into it. Today, we are not only going to be talking about how to search for clinical trials that need participants, but also what is Retatrutide? How does it work? This is going to be a quick overview of Retatrutide. Also, what do the phase 2 results actually say? Does the medication work? What can we expect if we are to join one of these clinical trials? Why should you join a trial? What are the pros and cons of joining a clinical trial for Retatrutide? And finally, how to search for clinical trials. This is going to be a step-by-step walkthrough. You're going to be watching over my shoulder on how I find enrolling trials for Retatrutide in this example. And once you're in a clinical trial, what you can expect as a participant. What will happen once you visit the site and enroll into a clinical trial? As a quick disclaimer, this video is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice, and the participation in any clinical trial should be discussed with your healthcare provider. With that being said, I am not a doctor, I am not your doctor, and this just comes from FDA results that are being published publicly, as well as my experience from working in clinical trials for the past 5 years. So what is Retatrutide? Retatrutide is a once-weekly injectable medication developed by Eli Lilly. It actually targets 3 hormone receptors, GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. It aims to reduce appetite, improve glucose control, and boost metabolism. So far, in a phase 2 clinical trial, Retatrutide showed that patients can lose up to 24% body weight in just 48 weeks. This was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2023. This medication is, as of now, more effective than existing GLP-1 drugs in early studies. Can you imagine how life-changing it must be to lose up to 24% body weight in 48 weeks for patients that are suffering from obesity? Now, how do you get Retatrutide? Like I've mentioned before, you can't simply go to your doctor and ask for it because it is still under investigation. It is still in clinical trials. You could get it online, but that's going to be a sketchy website that I highly suggest you stay away from because you don't know what exactly is in that compound. It might not be Retatrutide, it might be a combination of multiple things, or there might be contamination. You never know what you're getting when you buy something online. So the next best thing, of course, is to go into a clinical trial and participate to trial Retatrutide. So when you're considering signing up or enrolling into a clinical trial, these are some of the pros and cons that you can expect. First off, you're going to get access to cutting-edge medication. You're going to have access to medication that is not yet available on the market. These are investigational products, which are free for most studies. You don't have to pay anything out of pocket to participate in a clinical trial. And in fact, it may include compensation. It may include compensation for free study-related care, or you might be compensated for your time, your travel, and sometimes even meals. Plus, you're going to get close medical monitoring and support. The clinical trial site will closely monitor for any changes or unwanted effects from the medication. And you get to contribute to science. You help advance healthcare by contributing to science and future treatments for people with similar conditions. Now, what are some of the drawbacks? Well, there might be potential side effects. As with any medication, side effects can occur. Also, there's that time commitment. You have to show up and you might have to be at the site multiple times per month. And there's unknown effectiveness, or you might get the placebo, meaning that it may not work for you. The medication isn't going to work for everyone. And there is the possibility that you will be giving a placebo, which is basically a sugar pill or something that is meant to look like the actual medication, but it isn't. It has no active ingredient in it. We'll get into details about how different studies are built out. So there might be a clinical trial where everyone gets the medication, and there's other trials where it might be a double blind, where you don't know what you're going to get. So We'll talk about this later once we actually dive into finding clinical trials. Finally, the most important part, you'll get to look over my shoulder and see exactly how you can find clinical trials. So follow along as I go through ClinicalTrials.gov. And there are going to be more resources at our website, TheClinResearcher.gov. I'll leave the link down below in the description so that you can easily access it if you're having a hard time finding a clinical trial. Or if you have any questions, of course, leave it as a comment down below and I'll definitely do my best to get back to you. So let's go right into it. So we are here at ClinicalTrials.gov. This is an official website from the National Library of Medicine. And here it makes it easy for you to go ahead and look for clinical trials that might pertain to your condition, your disease, or you can use other filters such as if you know the intervention or treatment or your location. So there's a lot of different options. You can even click more filters and it'll give you a longer list. But for now, we're going to keep this video super simple, super easy, because I want to show you guys exactly how many clinical trials for Retatrutide are available right now that are enrolling. So let's get right into it because I'm very excited. So instead of typing in the condition or the disease, in this example, I'm going to simply type in Retatrutide, which as you can see here, I have looked it up before. And we are going to simply click on search. We still have the filter here on the left side, so we can continue to filter down. As you can see here, there are actually 12 studies for this medication. And they're here, but one more thing that I want to do is in the filters, we are going to go to recruiting. Recruiting meaning that they're actively looking for participants at the moment. We'll go ahead and apply the filters, and there are actually 6 studies that are currently enrolling participants for Retatrutide. So if you fit any of the qualifications that we will be talking about today, you can go ahead and call the clinic to see if they're still accepting and to see if you can qualify for this study. With that being said, let's go through a list of these 6 studies that are currently available for Retatrutide. The first one, a study of Retatrutide in the maintenance of weight reduction in individuals with obesity. So this one is for patients who are obese, and we're going to go ahead and talk about it in detail once we actually click in, but let's look into the next one. A study of Retatrutide compared to tirzepatide in adults who have obesity. Now, this one sounds super exciting because I've also done a video on semaglutide versus tirzepatide, and now there's a study on Retatrutide versus tirzepatide. So this is for obesity, and it is also something that is very exciting. I would like to say though that since there are so many patients who suffer from obesity in the US, there's no shortage of participants for these trials. So there is a chance that these trials might be recruiting, but they already met their enrollment targets, meaning that they already have enough patients. So we're going to walk through detail into all of these different studies, and I'm going to let you know exactly how you can contact the clinics. However, I do suggest that you sign up for a free newsletter at TheClinResearcher.gov so you know ahead of time what studies are coming out before they actually start enrolling. With that being said, the next one up is the effect of Retatrutide compared with placebo in adult participants with type 2 diabetes and inadequate glycemic control with diet and exercise alone. The importance of this one is that it is talking about diabetes. It can also help with that potentially, and that's why they want to trial it. So if you do suffer with type 2 diabetes, this clinical trial might be beneficial for you. These trials are a little bit more difficult to enroll into because not everyone who is obese has diabetes. Then we have a clinical trial for the effect of Retatrutide compared with placebo in participants with type 2 diabetes and moderate or severe renal impairment with inadequate glycemic control on basal insulin with or without metformin and or SGLT2 inhibitors. So this one is going to be talking about people who are diabetic and they have renal impairment, plus they might or might not use metformin. So this one gets a little bit more complicated. It's going to be harder to enroll participants into it. So if you do have all of these, let's call it qualifications, this might be a good study for you. And then we have Retatrutide on renal function in participants with overweight or obesity and chronic kidney disease with or without type 2 diabetes. Looking at the keywords here, you got to have chronic kidney disease. And then finally, the effect of Retatrutide once weekly on cardiovascular outcomes and kidney outcomes in adults living with obesity. This is a TRIUMPH outcomes. This is another clinical trial you might potentially look into, which is looking at the effects on cardiovascular health as well as kidney outcomes. With that being said, 6 clinical trials, that's a lot of trials for Retatrutide, and I know that you might be thinking, well, I don't fit into the category of diabetes or renal failure or anything like that we were talking about the other one. So we're going to go ahead and cover the first one in more detail. This is simply the maintenance of weight reduction in individuals with obesity. So let's go ahead and click into it. Once we are here, of course, it's going to give you the title. Triumph 6 is going to be the name of the trial. And this long number after the LY is the medication name, the clinical trial medication. Briefly here, it's going to tell you an overview, basically how the study works. This is a study of retatrutide in participants with obesity. The main purpose is to learn more about how retatrutide maintains body weight loss. The study will have 2 treatment phases, an 80-week lead-in phase in which all participants will take retatrutide dose 1, and a 36-week randomized double-blind phase in which participants will either take retatrutide dose 1, retatrutide dose 2, or switch to placebo. Participation in the study will last around 125 weeks. So let's break this down super quick. This part is the most important right here. 80-week lead-in phase in which all participants will take retatrutide. So remember how I was saying that one of the potential drawbacks of participating in a clinical trial is that you might get the placebo. In this clinical trial in particular, every participant gets the actual medication for 80 weeks. And then you might branch out into a double-blinded phase where you won't know if you're going to get the actual medication, if you're going to get dose 2, which is just a different dose, or if you're switching over to placebo. And overall, the commitment is going to take about 125 weeks. We'll talk about it later, but this is just if you're sticking with the whole study as it is laid out. Of course, you can withdraw your consent, meaning you can take away the consent and drop out of the trial at any point in time. That is one of your rights as a clinical trial participant. But if you stick with it, the whole trial will last about 125 weeks. Something else that's important to look at is on the right-hand column here. The start date was March 5th, 2025. As of this recording, it should be a pretty recent study. And it is estimated to be completed around April 2028. For enrollment, they are looking for 586 participants. It is interventional because you're actually taking a medication. There's some that are just registry studies where you just sign up and they watch you over time. Or there's observational studies. There's different kinds of studies. Interventional meaning that you're actually taking a medication. And then on the left-hand side, you have different options here for other tabs. We are going to go into context and locations, but first, I want to make sure that we cover participation criteria. This is very important because this is going to give you an idea on whether or not you might qualify for the study. So let's go ahead and click on participation criteria. And here, you're going to have a list. This is called the eligibility criteria. You're going to have inclusion criteria, which are things that they want you to have to participate in the study. So you have to have obesity and a history of at least one self-reported unsuccessful dietary effort to reduce body weight. Meaning you have at least tried once before to eat better, to diet, and it hasn't worked out for you. Exclusion criteria are things that they don't want you to have. If you have anything in this list, you don't qualify for the study. So we'll briefly talk on it. You can go into it in more detail, but some of the biggest things are that you can't have a body weight change of greater than 5 kilograms or 11 pounds within 90 days before screening. You also can't have or be planning on having any surgical treatments for obesity. You can't have endoscopic procedures. Most importantly here, the difference between this one and other trials we just briefly touched on is that you cannot have type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or any other type of diabetes. There's another clinical trial with the same medication that does include participants with type 2 diabetes, but this one does not. You also cannot have MTC or MEN2, and before 90 days, you can't have any of these things happening. So a heart attack, acute myocardial infarction, a stroke, being in the hospital for unstable angina, in the hospital for heart failure, or any of these other things here. You also cannot have taken any weight loss drugs, such as over-the-counter medications, within 90 days prior to screening. And then if we keep scrolling down, you'll see how it has different doses, right? So first you're going to get dose 1, and this is going to be for every participant. And this is going to go on for 116 weeks. And then you can go into dose 1 or dose 2 for 80 weeks. subcutaneously, SC, meaning that it is an injection, it isn't oral, right? And then lastly, the other option they might put you in is in the placebo comparator, meaning that you're going to be getting the placebo and they're going to compare you to the people who are actually taking the medication. Now, what is the study measuring? How do you know whether this medication is working or not from a clinical trial perspective? The researchers are actually going to be looking at the percent change from baseline in body weight. So they're going to look at it from week 0, which is when you're first starting, to week 116 and see how much of your body weight was lost in percentage. They're also going to look at the baseline in waist circumference. So at the very beginning up to week 116. Also, percentage of body weight reduction achieved at week 80 that is maintained at week 116. So how much of that weight loss are you able to keep off of you up until week 116? And then change from baseline and impact of weight on quality of life, light clinical trials version. So this is going to be a questionnaire. They're going to ask you how the impact has been on your weight loss. So what kind of impact from the weight loss you've been seeing in your day-to-day life. So now that we talked about all of these things, what you need to look for as far as if you qualify or not, how they're going to be measuring success, well, now it's time to look at the contacts and locations. Because if you're still interested in participating in the clinical trial, you've talked to your doctor, you've made the decision that you want to look into it at least, then it's time to go ahead and call your nearest clinic. So if you go to contacts and locations, you can look here and see all of the different states and even countries if it's going globally, so that you can find what is the nearest clinic to your house. For example, let's say that I live in Florida and this West Palm Beach is actually the closest one to me. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call Metabolic Research Institute at this number. The principal investigator is the doctor's name, but more than likely when you call this number, you'll go to the front desk and they can go ahead and transfer you there to the clinical research coordinator, who's going to ask you questions before you even come into the clinic. One of them might be, are you diabetic? Because that's going to automatically exclude you out of the study. And they'll ask you other questions just to see if you are interested in participating in a clinical trial. Again, I would first highly recommend that you look at this information, rewatch this video so you know what sections of this website to pay attention to, what to expect as a participant, and talk to your physician, talk to your primary care doctor or your specialist to make sure that this might be a good idea or a good fit for you. Then go ahead and contact the clinical trial site, make an appointment with them, you can meet with them and see if you qualify for the study. Now that you know how to find all of that information on ClinicalTrials.gov, what can you expect when you're participating? Well, the first part is simply the most important part, consenting. The consent process is a full explanation before you actually enroll. They're going to guide you through a form that is the consent. And on there, it's going to have all the information they would like you to know before you make up your mind, before you make the decision to enroll into the trial. It might talk about side effects. It might talk about what was seen before and prior phases of the study. And it might tell you also what your time commitment is. Once you understand that, you can ask any questions and you can go ahead and sign it, officially enrolling you into the trial. And of course, like I've said before, one of your rights as a participant is that you can withdraw consent at any time. You don't have to stay in the study. And whenever you have a question or something becomes uncomfortable, uneasy, you just don't want to participate in it, you can withdraw consent. Also, for the study visits, it might include blood tests, body scans or vitals, questionnaires. So this might happen from the screening visit from that first time that you go into the clinic because they want to make sure that you qualify. Sometimes there's disqualifiers in there. For example, your blood pressure is through the roof. Well, that might not be a good idea for you to enroll into a trial because you don't know what's going to happen with this new investigational medicine. Or perhaps there's a certain heart condition you might have. There's been oftentimes that when I was working at a clinical trial site, there was patients or participants coming in and they had no idea that they had a heart condition until we do an EKG. And of course, the EKG or whatever procedure is paid for by the sponsor. So you don't have to pay for that out of pocket. Or they didn't know that they were borderline diabetic or diabetic based on their A1C levels that we are able to get for them on that first visit. These are all free, and this is how they're going to closely monitor you anytime that you come in for follow-up visits. They're going to check for any changes to make sure that you're still safely enrolled in the trial. And as always, I highly recommend you subscribe to our YouTube channel, TheClinResearcher, so that you can stay on top of medical advancements when it comes to weight loss and how you can participate in clinical trials. If you need more information, please visit our site and subscribe to our newsletter at TheClinResearcher.com. You'll automatically get a free ebook sent to your mailbox whenever you sign up, so that you can learn about clinical trials and exactly what you can expect in more detail. You will also get, with the newsletter, frequent updates on any new clinical trials that you might be interested in, so that you can learn more, gain an understanding, and possibly participate in a clinical trial if it interests you. With that being said, please leave me any questions down below in the comments. I will get to them as soon as possible. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in one of these other videos here that YouTube is recommending.